Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is information@cuandreview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 18th of June 2025 from the news section. Glasgow £7.7 billion smaller under the SNP, says Darren Jones. This article is by Andrew Learmonth. The Chief Secretary to the Treasury has accused the SNP of costing Scotland's biggest city billions of pounds in lost growth, as the political row over last week's spending review escalates. Writing in the Herald, Darren Jones said the Scottish Government's failure to empower Glasgow has had a direct impact on jobs and growth. The Labour MP compared its performance to Greater Manchester, which grew by nearly 50% between 2014 and 2022. If the Glasgow City region had achieved the same level of growth, it would be £7.7 billion larger today, he said. The council disputed Mr Jones's figures and said recent economic data showed the Glasgow City region outpaced both Greater Manchester and the West Midlands in growth in recent years. His comments come after Susan Aitken, the leader of the SNP administration in Glasgow, wrote to Scottish Secretary Ian Murray to express her disappointment that Rachel Reeves had failed to offer a devolution deal for the region. She said the UK government had disempowered the city. The Chancellor's spending review included detailed commitments to expand integrated settlements for English city regions. Instead of having to bid for different pots of money, some areas in England now get one large, flexible budget they can spend over several years. This means local mayors have more freedom to decide how to invest in things like housing, transport and skills. After the latest spending review, this kind of funding is being extended to London, the North East, West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire and the Liverpool City region. They will join Greater Manchester and the West Midlands, which already have these deals. In total, it means 4 in 10 people in England will live in places where local leaders control how money is spent on growing the economy and improving public services. Ms Aitken said the lack of a similar deal for Glasgow meant it would be reduced to simply administering programmes on behalf of the UK government as if it were a small local authority. She added, the empowerment of our comparator city regions in England and the disempowerment of Glasgow city region threatens all of the progress we have made. In his column, Mr Jones said Glasgow had not been sidelined in the spending review, pointing to £1.7 billion of potential investment from a new investment zone, £250 million for Faz Lane, and millions more for town centre regeneration in communities across the region, including Drumchapel, Coatbridge, Greenock and Clydebank. He said, I could continue to list the monetary value of UK government investments for Glasgow and Scotland, but I know that when it comes to changing things, power can be just as important as pounds. Progress made in Greater Manchester and the West Midlands is proof that our big city regions can do more when they have greater control over funding and decisions in their areas. But in Scotland, the decision to devolve power from Holyrood and empower the city regions rests firmly with the Scottish Government. I know that Anna Sarwar and my colleagues in Scottish Labour have begun to set out plans for directly elected mayors with powers over skills and transport, so they can turbocharge growth in their cities and regions. This is the kind of fresh thinking that cities such as Glasgow deserve. This is in contrast to years of the SNP centralising power in Holyrood and cutting funding to Scotland's councils. Councillor Aitken welcomed Mr Jones's recognition of the value of city-region devolution, but accused him of implying that the UK government would only agree to such a deal for Scottish cities if Labour won the next year's Holyrood election. She said, Darren Jones is absolutely right to say that the devolution of resources to our city regions is essential to drive growth and innovation, and that Greater Manchester and the West Midlands are now, clearly, starting to reap the benefits of the deals they have been handed by the UK government. That is exactly why Glasgow City Region wants the same backing, and why I am disappointed to see him imply that the UK government's willingness to support Glasgow and Edinburgh depends on the result of next year's Scottish Parliament elections. Glasgow City Region partners know very well that many of the administrative powers we are seeking rest with the Scottish Government, which is why the proposition we have made has been made jointly to both of our governments at Holyrood and Westminster. The Chief Secretary is, however, rather evading the point, which is that the UK government is continuing to give the impression that it is not prepared to back cities in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland with the kind of single-pot funding deal that is being offered to their English counterparts. Simply pulling together a list of previously committed funding, most of it announced by the previous government, does not come anywhere close to giving Scottish cities what our English counterparts will benefit from. The City Council also disputed Mr Jones's figures, pointing to recent data which showed that in 2023, the Glasgow City region recorded growth of 10.8%, higher than Greater Manchester on 10.2% and the West Midlands on 9.5%. Unemployment in the region fell to just 2.9% in 2024, compared to 5% in Greater Manchester and 6.4% in the West Midlands. That article was by Andrew Learmonth. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 18th of June 2025, from the news section. Why are Oasis and their fans seen as a threat to the fringe? This article is by Brian Ferguson. The 2024 Edinburgh Festival Fringe had only just drawn to a close when it became clear that the event was highly likely to face yet another major challenge when it returned this summer. 5 years after the COVID pandemic forced the shutdown of Scotland's biggest cultural event, many of those involved in the staging of shows and running of venues were facing the prospect of the biggest ever scheduling clash on the doorstep of the Fringe. While Scottish fans of Oasis were scrambling to book tickets for their 3 shows in the Scottish capital, festival folk were wondering what they had done to deserve what many still see as an easily avoidable nightmare. While the Fringe had previously faced competition from sporting events like the 2012 London Olympics and the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow 2 years later, its organisers have never before had to grapple with the prospect of a run of stadium concerts at Murrayfield in August. Although outdoor shows have been staged, almost yearly at Murrayfield since 1983, when Oasis and AC/DC arrive in Edinburgh in August, it will be the first time that stadium concerts at the home of Scottish rugby will have clashed with the Fringe. The main source of anxiety from fringe venue operators is how much these shows will distort the market for ticket sales for their shows and programs. An overall audience of 290,000 music fans are expected to attend the 3 Oasis shows on August 8th, 9th and 12th, and an AC/DC show on August 21st, which was announced in February. The most immediate impact of the 3 Oasis concerts being confirmed was to send the price of accommodation in the city soaring way earlier than normal, unsurprising when previous Murrayfield shows have been credited with filling every hotel room in the city. A key source of frustration from fringe venues and the Fringe Society is that the Murrayfield shows have simply exacerbated the most serious challenge facing the festival. The cost of accommodation for artists and audiences was already said to be putting off growing numbers of people from even considering a trip to Edinburgh in August. Performers and companies are already said to have tried to avoid going head-to-head with the Oasis shows. However, most of the concerns about the Murrayfield gigs are over the impact on the last-minute ticket sales that are relied upon to fill fringe venues in August. First, there are real fears that the prices being charged for accommodation throughout August will be too much of a deterrent for people seeking to book a last-minute trip. Then there are concerns about Edinburgh's ability to cope with a huge influx of Oasis and AC/DC fans into an already busy city. The Fringe Society and fringe venues are already planning targeted marketing initiatives to try to persuade Murrayfield ticket holders as well as local residents who are within easy reach of the festival to buy tickets for shows. While the challenges thrown up by this year's culture clash will undoubtedly provide plenty of opportunities, particularly in parts of the city not normally busy with fringe goers, it is doubtful that anyone involved in the festival will be hoping for a repeat next year. But with Murrayfield now firmly established as Scotland's premier venue for outdoor stadium shows, they may be powerless to do anything that would prevent a repeat. That article was by Brian Ferguson. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 18th of June 2025 from the Voices section. Overseas view of Scotland speaks volumes, does it not? This article is by Ian McConnell. There was much to grab the attention in the latest foreign direct investment figures for Scotland, published this week. The top lines were mostly around the very impressive continuing strength of Scotland on the inward investment stage, something that you would imagine will stick in the craws of the nation's detractors. There was also an eye-catching shift when it came to the rankings of Scotland's 2 major cities on the number of foreign direct investment FDI projects won, in the figures published by accountancy firm EY in its latest attractiveness survey on Monday. Glasgow, with 27 projects, became Scotland's leading city for FDI for the first time in 5 years. Edinburgh held this top spot between 2020 and 2023. And Glasgow was the second most popular UK city outside London for FDI after Manchester. This is surely an encouraging fillip for Glasgow, which appears in many ways to have struggled more than Edinburgh in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, notably when it has come to its city centre. Edinburgh remained in good shape on the inward investment front in 2024, which was good to see from a Scottish perspective. The Scottish capital was not that far adrift of Glasgow last year. Aberdeen also ranked well amongst UK cities for FDI projects won. Scotland's 3 major cities are once again in the UK top 10 cities, EY observed, with Edinburgh having secured 24 projects and Aberdeen 12 projects. The overall Scottish figures for FDI were very encouraging. Scotland's share of UK FDI projects increased for a 6th consecutive year, which is an impressive trend. EY Scotland managing partner Ali Scott summed things up as follows. Put simply, Scotland continues to punch above its weight with inward investment. According to the EY figures, Scotland in 2024 remained second only to London in the league table of the UK's top locations for FDI. Scotland secured 135 FDI projects last year, according to the Attractiveness Survey. Although down by 4.9% on the all-time high annual number of 142 FDI projects won in 2023, the figure for 2024 was the second highest on record. While FDI is only one part of the Scottish economy, the challenge is ensuring the policy landscape continues to react to changing business and demographic needs. Many priorities of international investors considering Scotland are very similar to those of our homegrown business community: future-proofed infrastructure, an efficient planning system, a skilled workforce, simplified tax structure. Improve these levers and you're activating broader economic growth. Far from relaxing after a job well done, it's time for Scotland to take some confidence from these findings and to double down and cement its hard-won position. Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes on Monday highlighted the difficult global backdrop against which Scotland had achieved its FDI success in 2024, and this seemed like an apposite observation. She said, given the geopolitical uncertainties clearly affecting investor confidence across the world, this is an incredible endorsement of Scotland's proposition as a destination for global investment. Ms. Forbes also highlighted the amount of effort put into winning FDI projects. She said a huge amount of work across both the private and public sectors goes into securing these projects, which are vital for economic growth, job creation, and bringing benefits across our towns and cities. Adrian Gillespie, Chief Executive of Economic Development Agency Scottish Enterprise, observed in the wake of the EY figures, our staff in over 30 offices around the world are vital to building these trusted relationships with potential inward investors, which can often take years to cultivate. Having met some of these people over the years in countries around the world, their long-term approach and targeting of key sectors does seem to play a very important part in Scotland's success in winning FDI. Returning to EY's numbers, it is worth observing that the positivity shown by overseas companies which put their money where their mouths are by investing in Scotland contrasts at times with the whinging about the nation that you hear from some people. And it is worth noting overseas investors in Scotland are likely to be far more objective in assessing how the nation is doing on the business and economic front, and in evaluating the skills and other attributes of the workforce than some people domestically who have political axes to grind. That article was by Ian McConnell. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 18th of June 2025 from the business section. Investors acquire Scottish wind farm of impressive scale. This article is by Brian Donnelly. An investment firm has acquired a major wind farm site in Scotland. The renewables facility will be able to power 5,500 homes a year. Burgess Salmon advised Blackfinch Energy, part of Blackfinch Group, on its acquisition of Muir Hall Wind Farm Extension, the high-performing wind project based in south-central Scotland. The firm said the site, just an hour's drive from Edinburgh, is surrounded by several other turbines and stands out for its impressive scale and production capacity. With blade tip heights reaching 147 metres, Muir Hall Wind Farm Extension has some of the largest turbines in the Blackfinch portfolio and is one of Blackfinch Energy's most significant assets for annual energy generation, with the capacity to produce approximately 19 gigawatts annually, the equivalent of providing renewable energy to around 5,500 homes each year. Danny Lee, partner at Burgess Salmon's Edinburgh-based corporate energy team, including Senior Associate Niall Mackle and Solicitor Jenny Purcell, said, Blackfinch Energy boasts an impressive portfolio of over 70 wind and solar sites across the UK, and it's been a pleasure working with them as it continues to diversify Scottish-based assets with an acquisition that playing an important role in the renewable energy generation and makes impactful contributions to the local community. Alan Gorman, Investment Director at Gloucester-based Blackfinch, said Muir Hall Wind Farm Extension represents an ideal investment and established renewable assets with a proven track record. We enjoyed working with Burgess Salmon and all of the people providing excellent support throughout the acquisition process. That article was by Brian Donnelly.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 19th of June 2025, from the news section. Glasgow's new visitors' levy hoped to generate £60 million. By Josh Pizzuzzo-Pomaco. Visitors to Glasgow will be charged an average of £4.83 per night after the city's new tourist tax was approved this morning. Under the terms of the levy, which will be introduced in January 2027, hotel operators will be required to charge an extra 5% on overnight stays. 1.5% of each levy will be retained by accommodation providers to cover costs incurred by the scheme's implementation. The rest, an estimated £60 million, will be invested into city centre infrastructure projects and events. At a meeting of the Council's City Administration Committee today, Treasurer Ricky Bell said, "We have been lobbying the Scottish Government for some time to give us more powers to be able to raise our own revenues, and this is the start of what I hope will be a continuation of those powers being devolved to local government." The City of Edinburgh Council approved a similar levy in January over the objections of leading hospitality groups. Writing in the Glasgow Times yesterday, Bell said, "We reckon that if we add 5% to an accommodation bill, that's an average of just under £5 per night, then we could raise around £60 million extra income annually. Given the unprecedented pressures on public finances, that's a decent amount of money to help improve our city and its tourism offer." The SNP councillor added, "Visitor levies are common across much of the world. Cities such as Barcelona, Lisbon, Berlin, Hamburg and Paris have all introduced similar schemes in recent years and have all had an increase in visitor numbers." That article was written by Josh Pizzuzzo-Pomaco and read by Ian. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 19th of June 2025, from the news section. Poet and lecturer Jim Ferguson given home curfew over sex assault. Article written by Connor Gordon. A poet who carried out a sex attack on a woman in his own home was tagged for 16 weeks today. Jim Ferguson, 63, groped and kissed the victim at the flat in Glasgow's Denniston in September 2022. The woman, who came to visit Ferguson and his former friend Derek Brown, protested no before he backed away. Creative writing lecturer Ferguson, however, claimed that the incident did not happen. He instead insisted to have been the target of a harassment campaign after Mr. Brown had been kicked out of a poetry club they had been part of. but Ferguson was found guilty at Glasgow Sheriff Court of the single charge of sexual assault. Sheriff Vincent Lunny put Ferguson under supervision for 10 months, as well as the sex offenders register at today's/yesterday's sentencing. Ferguson's tactic will keep him indoors between 7pm and 7am. The court previously heard that Ferguson had initially gone back to his flat with Mr. Brown after being out with him. Mr. Brown contacted the women to come and join them. The pair were sat on the opposite couch to Ferguson while they listened to music. Prosecutor Redmond Harris said in his closing submission, the women stated that Ferguson enacted a very quick movement. He grabbed her breast, tried to kiss her and placed his tongue in her mouth, then backed away. She was shocked and surprised by Ferguson's actions. Mr. Brown told the court that the woman grimaced and told him no, Jim, before Ferguson left abruptly. The women recalled the incident months after it took place due to flashbacks. Ferguson denied the incident occurred when she gave his evidence to the court. Liam Runciman, defending, asked if he sexually assaulted the woman, and he replied, "No, I never have." He stated that he only met the woman 3 times in 30 years through going to his performances. Ferguson further claimed that matters arose after Mr. Brown was removed as a member of the Glasgow Literary Lounge Poetry Club. He said, "When we did not let him back in, the women and Mr. Brown started a campaign of harassment against me and the Glasgow Literary Lounge on social media and in emails." Ferguson claimed that he went to the police about matters but was told to deal with it in a civil court. He added he had no knowledge the women had contacted the police about the sexual assault. Ferguson said, "I reported them in May, and at some point in July the police came to me and charged me with sexual assault, which was a shock." Both Mr. Brown and the women told the court they were unaware Ferguson had earlier reported them to police. That article was written by Connor Gordon. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 19th of June 2025, from the news section. Swinney did nothing to save bus jobs, says Sarwar, by Andrew Learmonth, political editor. John Swinney has been accused of doing nothing to protect hundreds of manufacturing jobs at Alexander Dennis. During a fiery First Minister's questions at Holyrood, Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar said Mr. Swinney had misled Parliament by claiming he only recently became aware of the firm's troubles, describing it as not true. Mr. Sarwar cited a letter from August 2024, first disclosed in the Herald, in which Paul Sowbury, President and Chief Executive of Alexander Dennis's parent company NFI Group, wrote directly to the SNP leader warning that the government's procurement decisions risked undermining Scotland's domestic bus manufacturing industry. The company has since proposed consolidating its manufacturing operations in Scarborough, North Yorkshire, putting around 400 jobs at risk in Falkirk and Larbert. John Swinney received a letter almost a year ago directly from the company, Mr. Sarwar told MSPs, setting out how his decision to buy buses from China, instead of from Scotland, was putting the company and jobs at risk. He did nothing for the skilled workforce. But last week, as usual, he tried to find someone else to blame for his own failure by talking about UK procurement laws that did not stop Andy Burnham buying Scottish buses, but somehow stopped the SNP government. Mr. Swinney rejected the accusation, insisting the Scottish Government had taken action following the August letter, including setting up work between the firm and Scottish Enterprise. He said ministers had maintained a positive dialogue with Alexander Dennis, which had expressed appreciation for government support, including £58 million in zero-emission bus funding. "We established work for the Scottish Enterprise with the company to support the company in securing its future," he said. That work was taken forward as a consequence of that dialogue. But critics said the scale of the support did not match the urgency of the warning from Mr. Sowbury, who in his letter expressed regret that Scottish Government decisions had left the firm feeling it had no choice but to reconsider an entire investment in the Scottish operations of Alexander Dennis. The Scottish Labour leader also pointed to procurement data showing that, since receiving the letter, the Scottish Government had not ordered a single bus from Alexander Dennis, while Greater Manchester, operating under the same UK legal framework, had placed significantly more orders. In a new letter from UK Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden to Mr Sarwar, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster acknowledged that while UK subsidy rules prevent tying grants to domestic purchases, there is nothing to stop governments awarding subsidies directly to manufacturers, such as Alexander Dennis. He also said that the Scottish Government could use the Crown Commercial Service framework, where Alexander Dennis is already a supplier, to apply social value criteria favouring local industry, or to issue a direct award. Under the new Procurement Act, bids from countries such as China, which are not part of the UK trade agreements, can also be lawfully disregarded. Mr McFadden wrote, "The Subsidy Control Act does not prevent manufacturers, such as Alexander Dennis, receiving subsidies directly, and this remains an open and viable option for the Scottish Government." He added that the Procurement Act allows contracting authorities to disregard bids from non-treaty state suppliers, which includes countries like China. Alexander Dennis has argued that the Scottish Government policy failed to align with its own just transition principles, noting that 83% of orders under the second phase of the Zero Emission Bus Challenge Fund, ScotZEB2, went to manufacturers in China and Egypt. The company received just 17% of the 252 bus order, despite its long-standing presence in Falkirk and years of support from Scottish enterprise. And that article was written by Andrew Learmonth.
This article is from the Herald on Thursday, the 19th of June 2025. It is from the Voices section, and the headline is, "Grooming has been in Scotland for decades. We need an inquiry now." And the report is by Neil Mackay. 25 years ago, I embarked on the most disturbing and personally upsetting investigation of my career. It began around the end of the year 2000, when a police officer told me that child prostitutes were working on the streets of Glasgow. I urge you not to hate this officer for the words used. Back then, that was the only language available. The term grooming hadn't yet been invented. The officer cared and wanted a reporter to bring these crimes to public attention. Technically, this was an exceptionally complex and difficult investigation. It took a long time to make headway. I teamed up with a Herald colleague, Jennifer Johnson, and we shared the work. By spring 2002, we'd compiled enough material to publish what I considered a story of real public interest. We revealed that an estimated 300 children, both boys and girls, were being raped and sexually exploited in Scotland. A third of the offences were believed to be happening in Glasgow. As far as we could understand, most of the children were care experienced. I recall one conversation where a caseworker told me that men would pick up some of the girls from outside the gates of their care home. Did staff know what was happening? Yes, I was told, but what could they do? I thought, well, stop them for Christ's sake, restrain them, confront the paedophile, call the cops, do something, anything, protect the child. I'd recently become a parent and remember returning home one night, reading my daughters their bedtime story, coming downstairs and bursting into tears at the thought of what was happening in this city. We discovered that in one 6-month period of 80 children known to have been sexually exploited, 57 were girls and 23 boys. It's important to remember how long ago this was. Reports of grooming gangs of Asian men operating in England didn't emerge until 2011. Back in 2002, I was distinctly uneasy with the term child prostitution. Children can't consent to sex due to the fact they are children. The children, we learned, were being plied with drink and drugs as well as money. Often they were being groomed, we'd now say, by men offering them fake affection. It was truly a glimpse into hell, I felt. Some of the children who were being raped were as young as 12. It's important to note that ethnicity was not an issue which emerged during the investigation, apart from once. We became aware of one young girl who was seen at Glasgow Green getting into the car of a white man. She was believed to be aged around 14. She drove away with the white man, then returned to Glasgow Green, where she got into the car of an Asian man. It was believed at the time that the white man had paid to rape the child and that the Asian man had sold her to the white man. I can offer no further information on ethnicity in terms of the offenders. Jennifer and I wrote 3 investigations across 3 weeks. We truly believed that our work would lead to public outrage, political action and a public inquiry. In the end, nothing really happened. The then Labour administration in Scotland made a statement which we reported that child prostitution is nothing less than a scandal. The children are victims and we must provide them with the support they need. One girl we spoke to was called Marie. She was just 14 when she was first raped, or prostituted, as society would have then termed her abuse. She spent much of her young life moving from refuge to care home to secure unit after her parents split up when she was 7. Most of the men who abused her were married, she told us. Perhaps the language used a quarter of a century ago explains the lack of action, the lack of interest, the lack of care. Remember also that this was a time when images of child abuse were referred to as child pornography. I recall a police officer I worked with at one stage who was part of Scotland Yard's paedophile unit. He was the first person I heard say that the words child pornography should be ditched for the term images of child abuse. I was stunned that the stories we worked on all those years ago weren't followed up by other media outlets. As far as I understand, the most that happened was that a working group in the Scottish Parliament was established to consider the support needs of children who run away from home and children abused through prostitution. The Scottish Parliament's website today says that the intention in January 2003 was to address the lack of data on the numbers of young people sexually exploited through prostitution. I must also wonder if perhaps the lack of ethnicity as a component of the story played a part in how little attention the investigations gathered at the time. For 25 years, memories of this story have eaten away at me. I brought it up when the grooming gang scandal first came to public attention in 2011, but again, nobody seemed to care much. Today, those 300 children will now all be in their 30s at least. The men who raped them will still be alive. If they offended in 2001, they could still be offending now. If this happened in Glasgow at the turn of the millennium, it could still be happening. There are calls for Scotland to launch its own grooming gang inquiry. I fully support this. Such an inquiry does not have to and should not take place under a pall of hysteria and inflammatory racist rhetoric. Any inquiry should have one purpose: the protection of children. We need to establish what has happened in this country, why it was allowed to happen, how the state failed children, and who the perpetrators were and are, regardless of their ethnicities. To do otherwise doesn't just fail the victims of the past, as well as the victims of the present, but it dooms the most vulnerable children of the future to face the same horrors all over again. That report was by Neil Mackay.
The Herald on the 20th of June and the Voices section. Will 2026 see people voting against parties rather than for them? By Mark McGauchan. The First Minister gave 2 major speeches at the start of this week. In the first, delivered to an audience at the Imaging Centre of Excellence at Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, he pledged a national project of renewal for Scottish public services, arguing that the status quo across almost every field of endeavour no longer serves the public properly. I doubt that many of us would disagree. The second, delivered to the Scotland 2050 conference, argued that only with independence could Scotland fix that broken system, which delivers for a very few at the very top, while living standards stagnate and real wages are squeezed. I imagine that's a view that's rather more contentious. Mr Swinney's 2 speeches mark a significant shift in the SNP's political strategy after their defeat in the Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse by-election at the start of this month, when he and Kate Forbes, his Deputy First Minister and Economy Secretary, took over from Humza Yousaf in May last year. Their priority was righting the ship. The SNP had been losing support ever since Nicola Sturgeon's resignation, and under Mr Yousaf's leadership had been overtaken by Scottish Labour, ultimately leading to their heavy defeat in the general election last July. Mr Swinney and Ms Forbes have succeeded in stabilising their party's position. Since July, support for the SNP has picked up slightly, but their vote share is still down significantly at around 30 to 35%, at least 12 points lower than their result at the 2021 Scottish Parliament elections. The Hamilton by-election was a painful reminder of that fact, and that despite the collapse in Labour support since the general election, the SNP are still vulnerable in constituencies across the country. Current polling would see them win as many as 60 seats next May, down only a handful compared to 2021. But many of those seats will be tightly contested, and swings similar to what we saw in Hamilton could cost them 10 to 15 seats. What has been missing from Mr Swinney and Ms Forbes is a vision for Scotland that reflects public feeling about the state of public services and the Scottish economy and charts a way out of the morass. That's what Mr Swinney sought to provide this week. Whether that vision, such as it is, cuts through and either shores up the SNP's voter base or wins back some of those who supported them in 2021 but did not last year, is up in the air. The SNP have been in government for nearly 2 decades, and it's showing. They look and feel like a tired government running low on ideas and the political capital necessary to make the sweeping changes that Mr Swinney says are necessary. In the most recent Scottish Social Attitudes Survey, trust in the Scottish Government to work in Scotland's best interests fell below 50% for the first time. Just 23% said they were satisfied with how the Scottish NHS is running, the lowest in the devolution era, and 83% said that standards of living in Scotland are falling, a new high. I suspect that Mr Swinney's claim that the status quo no longer serves the public well will resonate just fine. His challenge is to persuade the public that he and the SNP have now governed Scotland for so long without delivering the change he is claiming is necessary, are the right people to deliver that change. That will be a much harder case to make. Tying that change to independence makes that case much harder. I understand why he has had to bring the constitutional question back to the foreground for party management reasons, as disquiet around his apparent failure to make a case for secession burst into the open after Hamilton. But a big part of the reason why so many independent supporters voted Labour last July was the SNP's apparent inability to deliver independence or significant change without independence. The former has not been addressed. The same insurmountable obstacles exist. Nothing has changed on that front since the UK Supreme Court ruled that Holyrood could not legislate for a referendum back in November 2022. And the latter cannot be addressed if Mr Swinney is simultaneously arguing that sweeping change is needed and that independence is a prerequisite for that change. Independence might be a priority for SNP members and legislators, but it is not a priority for the Scottish public. Just 1 in 8 Scots think that independence is a top issue facing the country, compared to a majority who prioritise the economy and the NHS, and a third who prioritise education. Even among those who voted SNP last July, just a third prioritise independence. There's a risk that putting independence at the heart of their campaign next May distracts from the rest of the SNP's message and leads to a sense that they are out of touch with the public's priorities. In the end, though, none of that might matter, because there is no single party the voters are rallying to as an alternative to the SNP. While Mr Swinney, Ms Forbes and their party are hardly popular, just 34% of Scots have a favourable view of Mr Swinney, and 21% of Ms Forbes. Labour are even less so. 27% of Scots has a favourable view of Keir Starmer, and just 20% have a favourable view of Anas Sarwar. While only around 1 in 5 Scots think the Scottish Government is doing a good job on managing the economy or improving the state of the NHS or Scottish education, just a fifth think that Labour would do a better job. quarter think that they would do even worse. Mrs. Swinney may spend the months leading up to next year's Holyrood elections pitching a big vision. And of course, he must begin laying the groundwork for the SNP's campaign and start making a compelling argument for why voters should let him hold onto the keys to Bute House. Who knows whether that will cut through and persuade everybody, but I have my doubts. It's far more likely that next year's election will be defined by dissatisfaction with both the Scottish and UK governments and distrust of politicians generally, with voters voting against parties and politicians they dislike most rather than for those they like. And that was by Mark McGauchan.
From the Herald Scotland, Saturday the 21st of June 2025, from the news section. The Poverty Premium, Why Do We Tolerate Harm? By Sarah Jane Dunn. Being poor is more expensive than being rich. That concept baffles a lot of people, but it's true. It's what many call the poverty premium, the fact that it costs low-income households more than others just to access essential services. For those who work in a frontline service like Citizens Advice Network, this isn't an abstract idea simply referenced in academic papers. It's reality. I grew up in extreme poverty, so I understand it only too well. It's the reason why I got into money advice as a career and why I'm so passionate about it. CAB advisors see the poverty premium every day in the faces of the people who come to them for help. More often than not, these people are desperate, usually at a point of crisis where they have nowhere left to turn. I recently heard about a woman who came to our local Citizens Advice Bureau in distress after falling into rent arrears and facing eviction, a result of a series of failures by systems that are meant to help her. It was a snowball effect. She experienced earnings arrestment for council tax, her universal credit was cut, and she was using her credit card just to stay afloat. This is one of thousands of examples where CABs across Scotland are acting as a backstop for systematic failure across the economy. For a start, there's the credit market. People in low incomes often don't qualify for low interest financial products, so are forced to use the more expensive high interest options. Then there's the banking system. As banks continue to move away from our high streets, anyone who doesn't live near a branch and isn't tech savvy will have to travel to access basic services. If they're lucky, there might be an ATM in their local area, but they might then face a £2 charge to simply access their money. And then there's the energy market, where people experiencing poverty or are on lower incomes often pay more for their energy due to the low energy efficiency of their home. Many also pay when bills arrive, rather than by direct debit, which can result in a premium of £130 more per year. This is how the cumulative effect builds up. Some estimates put the total poverty premium at an average of £500 per year. If you're struggling financially in Scotland today, you get financially penalised for it. In other words, it costs more to have less. So, why don't we explore solutions like more flexible banking and credit options, or redesigning cash access infrastructure and actually help people who need support, not push more costs onto them? We've repeatedly called for a social tariff to be applied to all sectors, including the energy market, and for improvements in social security so that people have more money to begin with. These ideas are not rocket science. They're sensible, pragmatic and perfectly achievable, but only if ministers, regulators and institutions have the imagination and the will to achieve them. The poverty premium shames us, yet it could be eliminated. Are we willing to do that, or will we just keep tolerating harm? And that article was written by Sarah Jane Dunn, who is manager of the financial health team at Citizens Advice Scotland. From the Herald Scotland, Saturday the 21st of June 2025, from the sports section. Exclusive. Josh Kerr, getting to the top is the easy part, staying there is tough. This article is an exclusive by Susan Eaglestaff. The easy part, says Josh Kerr, is getting to the top. What's considerably harder, he's finding out, is staying there. While retaining his place at the top of the men's 1500 metres tree is far from easy, Kerr is as well equipped as anyone to manage it. There are few better examples of Kerr's ability to live up to both the hype and the pressure than his last outing. Earlier this month, at the Grand Slam track meet in Philadelphia, the Scot was in a lowly 6th place with just 200 metres of the 1500 metres to go. 20 seconds later, he'd won the race, beating the Olympic champion in the process. It was a performance that illustrated Kerr's desire, desperation even, to continue improving year on year, which is not always easy when the standard you've set is being the best 1500 runner on the planet. For sure, it's easier to get to the top than to stay at the top, Kerr says. When you're trying to get to the top, you can take multiple attempts, whereas when you're trying to stay at the top, every person on the planet is gunning for you in every single race. Getting to the top, you're exploring what works for you, and to stay at the top, you have to keep adapting and get the balance right. I've learned so much over the past 3 years, and now I've got a real wealth of knowledge about what works for me and what doesn't. Each year, I up my level of professionalism and improve the way I live my life, the way I train, and the way I race. I've built off last year and I feel the strongest I've ever been. I'm working on my speed now, so I think it's going to end up with some pretty awesome performances. The 27-year-old from Edinburgh has evolved into one of the faces of track and field. His World 1500 metres title in 2023, which was bookended by Olympic bronze and Olympic silver in 2021 and 2024, is, to date, the high point of Kerr's career and kick-started a rivalry with the Norwegian Jakob Ingebrigtsen, which brought an audience to the sport whose attention had been captured by the back and forth between the pair. Both Kerr and Ingebrigtsen, however, failed to become Olympic champion last summer, with American Cole Hawker producing one of the upsets of Paris to claim the 1500 metres title. Given Kerr had begun last year stating explicitly that his aim was to become Olympic champion, his Olympic silver was, on paper, a failure. But a personal best time and a British record in the Olympic final softened the blow somewhat, and over the months that followed Paris 2024, Kerr came to accept that he's not always going to be able to live up to the standards he sets himself. And he hasn't, perhaps surprisingly, used a defeat in the Olympic final as a motivation for this season. Olympic silver produces very mixed emotions, he says. I've shown up every year for the last 6 years and run either a season's best or a personal best in major championship finals. And that's the best I can do. I have no control over what anyone else does. Yes, if I don't win, I'm not happy with how my year went. That's a pretty tough standard to meet, and it's one I'm not going to meet every year because I'm a human being. When you set those standards, you have to be strict with yourself, but I love what I do, and if I wasn't getting paid to do it, I would still do it, because I'm so curious to see how far I can push my body and see if I can keep putting on these performances in the high pressure environments. Kerr has raced 6 times so far this year, all of which have been at Grand Slam track meets. The new venture, set up by Olympic running great Michael Johnson, was developed with the aim of revitalising athletics and bringing it to a new, wider audience. Kerr has been one of the most prominent faces in Grand Slam track this season, and on the track, the Scot certainly lived up to his billing, winning his first Grand Slam track title in the second meet in Miami last month, with an impressive performance over both 1500 metres and 800 metres, and taking home $100,000 as a result, while, at the most recent meet in Philadelphia, Kerr produced one of the most thrilling performances of the weekend with his aforementioned surge from 6th place to 1st in the 1500 metres. This race in particular highlighted one of the major selling points of Grand Slam track, which is that athletes will be racing to beat each other rather than merely chasing fast times, which is what, to its detriment, the sport has widely focused upon in recent years. Grand Slam track has lofty aspirations to change the face of athletics, and, while not all of the initial aims have been fulfilled, Kerr retains the belief that it's been, and will continue to be, a very good thing for the sport. The first meet was the first meet. We weren't sure how it was going to go, and in some respects the organisers wanted it to be the Super Bowl, but that's very hard to do, he says. What was awesome about it, though, is that it was continually being tweaked to make it better. And as athletes, we had an awesome time. We got treated like professionals and we raced against the best athletes in the world, which I really liked. Recently, we've been running time trials a lot, and I wouldn't say that becomes boring, but it's very difficult physically and mentally to keep running like that. In the 1500 metres at a Grand Slam track, we provided some really great entertainment, and that's what people like watching. So I feel like Grand Slam track is in a really good trajectory, and I'm excited to see how it looks next season. A sizable bump in the road for the Grand Slam track has been the cancellation of the fourth and final meet, which had been scheduled for next weekend in LA. It is, says founder Michael Johnson, a business decision. And while many have used the meet's cancellation as a stick with which to beat the project, Kerr feels none of that pessimism. There's always going to be positives and negatives at the start of every new venture, and Grand Slam track is just trying to find its way. And actually, I think dropping LA this season is the right decision, he says. It's easy for audiences to sit and critique, but I feel like Grand Slam track was good because it was improving with each meet. There's always going to be some negatives around a decision like the one to cancel LA, but at the end of the day, they want to put on the best track meets in the world and elevate the sport, which can only be a good thing. The cancellation of next week's event means Kerr's competitive appearances will be sparse between now and the World Championships in Tokyo in September, at which he'll be defending his World 1500 metres title. On his schedule between now and his world title defence is only the London Athletics meet next month and the British Championships in August. This will, he is confident, ensure he's in the best possible shape both physically and mentally when he arrives in Tokyo later in the season. The year is planned out to make sure I'm at my best for Tokyo, and that's all on track, he says. My sessions are coming together, and everything else is coming together too, so I can't complain with where I'm at. Things are going to plan as of right now, and the aim is absolutely to retain my world title. That article was an exclusive by Susan Ecclestaff, and it was read by me, Ian.
From Herald, Scotland, 19th of June 2025. From the STEM section of the business section. This extreme metal album blew up one weekend. Now it's accused of AI. Article by Derek MacArthur. The cautionary tales surrounding AI art get ever more ridiculous and concerning. Superstar music producer Timbaland has announced an AI record label with the signing of uncanny AI singer Tata. Renowned film auteur Darren Aronofsky recently announced a partnership with Google DeepMind for his AI-driven film studio Primordial Soup, with its first project just having had its premiere at Tribeca Festival. These examples are out in the open, attached with a clear mission statement, framed by their practitioners as the next step in the future of art creation. But what about when the algorithmic infection begins to worm its way out of the mainstream and into the underground, where screams of authenticity are paramount? It all began last Friday, when an album by Czech black metal artist Drogvile was uploaded to YouTube. Its striking cover art of a young long-haired knight draped in corpse paint laid upon a bed of roses caught the eyes of many, and its popularity snowballed instantly. But something else caught the eyes of some, that the roses seemed a little off. The rose stems protrude from the ground in an unrealistic fashion, so, in line with the times, accusations of AI trickery arrived swiftly and spread fast. Soon, the music itself was accused of being AI, or outlines of songs fully formed once put through the generative music program SUNO. There's no indication that this is the case, and the music is in line with what one would expect from a one-man black metal project in the vein of Judas Iscariot and Burzum. But then if AI was asked to create music in a black metal style, that is probably what it would decide to generically produce and spit out. A Reddit thread titled, Had to leave band because singer was too obsessed with AI art, was also linked to the project, but nothing indicates a connection beyond mere conjecture of how certain details might match up. Alas, it was just another factor for many that deception was afoot in the underground metal community. The germ of the strange roses became the igniting catalyst for the torrent of accusations, but that itself does not indicate the use of AI. Album covers hardly need to exist in the realm of the real, and it's not out of the ordinary to find details within album art that do not line up with their real-world counterparts. For all we know, the artist was a few roses short of a bed, and the suspicious plants were digitally placed there in image editing software, which is totally standard practice. On the part of the YouTube channel that gave the album a platform, Black Metal Promotion, they say Draugweil sent them screenshots of the songs in a digital audio workstation. That does not mean there was no AI in play, but then it likely means there was a creator's hand guiding the work at the very least. But the intensity of the speculation and the sheer speed of the AI narrative setting in shows how quick we are to jump the gun in our suspicions of AI as a looming threat waiting round every corner. That's not surprising, considering the use of AI in art is bound to get even more complicated, deceptive and normalised. But it does not help if suddenly every artistic eccentricity is now in the firing line for inauthenticity through an assumption of AI use. For many in the discussion, Draugweil's album being a result of AI is an indisputable fact, repeated until it becomes truth. Many say Draugweil needs to clarify with a statement, but that would be the biggest mistake to make. The hype generated by the intense back and forth discussions, the mystery of what the reality is a more powerful promotion than whatever the truth might come to be. It is reminiscent of the hijinks of 2000's black metal project Velvet Cocoon, which became infamous for mixing in fake albums that never existed and stealing songs from local bands and passing them off as their own, all because the ensuing confusion and outraged bluster would be entertaining for them. Before, accusations of inauthenticity lay in intentions, but now it is the process that is being questioned. If the threshold for suspicion is this low, we're heading toward a future where artists will have to prove their humanity just to be taken seriously. Whether Draugweil is a project born from AI may always be a mystery, unless the artist speaks and makes their case, but the prevailing sense is that people want it to be true for the thrill of catching a fraud in the act and to satisfy any lingering purist paranoia. But if every strange flourish in an album cover or every odd-sounding riff becomes grounds for an AI witch hunt, where does that leave human creativity in the end? And that article was written by Derek MacArthur. From Herald Scotland, 20th of June 2025. From the STEM section of the business section. XSense Link Plus Pro Smart Smoke Alarm reviewed. Article by Sean Dimmock. What is it? An advanced fire detection system that blends traditional smoke alarm reliability with smart home convenience. Good points. The compact and lightweight design makes installation easy, even for those less handy. It comes with all necessary mounting tools and doesn't require complex setup. One standout feature is the alarm's ability to verbally notify users of both the smoke detection and its specific location. This makes exiting a home safer, as you can potentially avoid a fire area. By linking with the SBS 50 base station, you can connect multiple alarms throughout your home. If one goes off, they all do. This synchronised warning system ensures faster response times for everyone in the household, no matter where they are. The companion app notifies you immediately when smoke is detected, even if you're not home. It also lets you run remote tests, check battery levels, and hush false alarms from your phone. Built with a long-life photoelectric sensor, the alarm is made to last for up to a decade. It also features a replaceable battery with an impressive 5-year lifespan. Night mode allows you to disable the bright green LED indicator during specific hours. This is perfect for light sleepers. The system can support up to 50 X-Sense devices, making it ideal for larger areas to cover. Bad points? No built-in heat detector means you'll need to purchase an additional device for the kitchen. Best for homeowners seeking a scalable, smart smoke alarm system with strong remote features and voice alerts. Avoid if you're looking for a simple, budget smoke alarm without additional bells and whistles. Score 9 out of 10. X-Sense Link Plus Pro Smart Smoke Alarm, £79.99 from amazon.co.uk. And that article was written by Sean Dimmock.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 24th of June 2025 from the business section. Workers at Maui salmon processor treated worse than the fish. This article is by Vicky Allen. A report from a workers' union has highlighted health and safety issues at a salmon fish processing plant in Rosyth, Fife, saying it left them feeling workers are treated worse than the fish. The Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union has outlined a list of concerns about the health and safety of the workforce at the Maui plant and concluded that health and safety is quite possibly being treated as a secondary consideration. The Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union is the BFAWU. General Secretary Sarah Woolley said, "Every worker going to work should feel that their health, safety and well-being is sacrosanct and a central priority for their employer. But in our time representing workers at Maui, we have found that our members at Maui are not treated with the respect and the dignity that every worker deserves. This report outlines many of the issues we have concerns about, based on the work we have done with members and speaking directly with them about their observations and experiences. We truly hope that our report acts as a wake-up call to management at the plant." The report, based on testimony of workers and union officials who represent employees at Maui, revealed a long list of complaints, including lack of toilets, time-limited toilet breaks, workers having to get toilet cover before they can go, inadequate canteen facilities, including a lack of seating for workers, often working 12-hour shifts. Other concerns included lack of mitigation to help workers working in cold working temperatures for long periods of time, and manual handling practices that could be resulting in injuries from repetitive work are some of the concerns raised in the report. Strong concerns were also expressed about their sickness absence policy, deemed unfair because it gives discretion to managers about whether a worker gets sick pay or not if they are off sick. In some cases, staff spoke of having had sick pay withdrawn, even if they are off work due to workplace accidents and injuries. These issues raised in the report have led the Bakers Union to question just how seriously Maui takes the human rights of its workers. In their 2021 annual report, Maui wrote about the importance of human rights and how it is at the core of their operations. Human rights are at the core of a sustainable business. BFAWU Scottish organiser Mark McHugh said, "Through the work we do representing workers and from talking to members, it seems that too often the health and well-being, physical and mental, is a secondary consideration for the management of Maui at Rosyth. At times it feels like the workers are treated worse than the fish. This is contrary to their self-congratulatory proclamations about how much they respect human rights. We are concerned that basic rights are not applied at their Rosyth plant. No adult should be told when to go to the toilet, if they can go, and how long they can go for. It is ridiculous and wrong, but sadly this is the culture that this report has exposed. If there was a functioning and proactive health and safety culture, then many of the issues we have raised in the report would have been dealt with. The fact they haven't been demonstrates how unsatisfactory their approach is. An intervention in writing to the company during the writing of the report has resulted in some small improvements. McHugh said, "We have always said to Maui that as a union we want to engage constructively with them to help make improvements to the terms and conditions of workers at Maui in Rosyth. We believe this will benefit the workforce and indeed the company as a whole. We are, as always, ready to speak to the company and work with them to improve health and safety at Rosyth. We hope that they do so." A spokesperson for Maui said, "At Maui, we take ethical employment, including the safety and well-being of our workforce, extremely seriously. We undergo regular unannounced audits by independent third parties to verify this. As such, we do take issue with the points raised by the BFAWU, which are false and misleading. Maui operates standard procedures in a processing plant. With regard to toilet breaks, there is no truth at all in the allegation that these are timed or limited to 7 minutes. We do require an allocated number of people working on a line at any given time to keep it running. This is the same for any factory running a production line. Our compliance and practices are under constant review, checked internally and through regular independent external third-party audits. We have robust safety management practices in place. All roles and activities are risk assessed by both qualified health and safety professionals and occupational health experts, and all advice provided by them is implemented. In addition, employees are actively encouraged to raise ideas, suggestions, or concerns. We also have a Health and Safety Committee, which meets each month and is represented by safety reps, adhering to the Health and Safety Consultation with Employee Regulations of 1996. On a practical level, just as one of many examples, we have invested several millions of pounds into new equipment which reduces the number of repetitive tasks carried out on site, choosing to engineer out risk rather than simply reducing it by asking employees to rotate between tasks. With regard to sickness benefit, we go further than statutory sick pay with an enhanced company sick pay, CSP policy. CSP is paid consistently, subject to the individual in question having met our sickness absence rules, which include keeping Maui informed about the nature and expected duration of the absence. This is standard practice. Finally, with regard to wages, making simple pay comparisons to other countries ignores complex differences in cost of living, income tax rates, and state benefits. Our reward structure is transparent and fair. Maui is supportive of our colleagues' rights to join a union and to seek collective representation, should they wish. That article was by Vicky Allen. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 24th of June 2025, from the Voices section. Remember the blood and lies of Iraq? We can't do it again with Iran. This article is by Neil Mackay. I was in the midst of a family party when news of America bombing Iran sucked the life from the room. The night was ending. The youngest there, 2 little ones not yet 5, were being roused from the couch to make their way home with Mum and Dad. The rest of us planned one last drink. It was around 1 a.m. My daughter picked up her phone to call a cab, scrolled and said, "America has bombed Iran." There was a moment of collective horror. A few whispered, "Ooh, oh no." The mood quickly became strange, though. It wasn't really fear or anger, more this weight of powerlessness pressing down on us all. What could we, mere people, mere citizens, do any more? A friend nailed it. We're trapped on a planet with 3 lunatics who are going to kill us all. He meant Trump, Putin, and Netanyahu. The older the folk, the greater the sense of helplessness. Back in 2003, I was 33. At the time, that age felt very adult. Looking back, I realize how young and naive I was. In the run-up to the Iraq invasion, I wrote investigation after investigation, dealing the lies which the governments of Tony Blair and George Bush were spinning to justify their illegal war. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Blair, Bush, and their bloody-handed sidekicks knew that. They wanted war. They'd the taste of blood in their mouths. I turned all those investigations into a book, thinking, like a fool, it might matter. I marched with 1 million other people, thinking that might matter. And still the war came. Iraq destroyed Britain and America. Our governments committed a monstrous sin based on deliberate lies, killed mountains of fellow human beings, and unleashed hell across the Middle East. No Iraq, no Islamic State. Blair brought terror to British streets. The chaos in the Middle East created millions of refugees, whose arrival in Europe was used to crowbar our societies apart. We threw trillions away on a meaningless, pointless bloodbath. Iraq was the first step towards the mass rejection of politics we see today. If our governments could lie to us on such an issue, a matter of life, death, and morality, then how could we trust them on anything? So I wasn't much surprised on Saturday night. If Iraq could happen in the face of all those warnings, all that protest, then of course Iran could be bombed. Indeed, the bombing felt inevitable. Like Iraq, Iran is a brutal regime whose leaders should be in The Hague. Yet, like Iraq, the cruelties which leaders have inflicted on their people isn't the casus belli for Iran. The reasons we, the powerless citizenry, are given as a justification is, once again, weapons of mass destruction. Are we to be fools twice over? Iraqi weapons of mass destruction was a lie. There's no reason to believe anything Western governments or their intelligence services say when it comes to Iran and its nuclear program. It's the ultimate case of the boy who cried wolf. Iran could have an atomic bomb, but how could anyone trust the people who sit in Washington and London? However, the notion that Iran has such weapons doesn't need much to knock it down. In March, Trump's National Intelligence Director, Tulsi Gabbard, said, "Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003. At Trump's command, she cravenly changed her mind. There have been claims that Iran was building a bomb since 1979 when the Shah was overthrown. In 1984, West German intelligence claimed Iran's production of a bomb was entering its final stages. Diplomatic talks with Iran on nuclear weapons were ongoing until Israel's government persuaded Trump to start bombing. There were 5 rounds of talks. Israel unleashed its military campaign 2 days before the 6th round of negotiations. America destroyed any hope of diplomacy. Israel's government, under the leadership of Netanyahu, is out of control. Indeed, Britain and America and other Western nations should question their relationship with Israel's current government, given the horror it has unleashed in Gaza. We should note with grave solemnity that last November, a UN Special Committee and Israeli government policies and practices in Gaza were consistent with the characteristics of genocide. We are now at the stage when America's sanctions risk spreading the Middle East conflict. If America is sucked in deeper, then it's inevitable that Britain will be dragged in deeper too, traipsing behind our US masters. That cannot happen. Any attempt by Keir Starmer to join America and Israel must be subjected to a vote in Parliament, and MPs put under such pressure by constituents that Labour is stopped in its tracks. Certainly that's what every single person at that Saturday night house party in Glasgow believed. I kept my cynicism to myself, however. How could I believe protest might work when I'd seen Iraq happen? Yet why destroy the last vestige of hope among the young in the dying moments of a night of good cheer and friendship? Those at the party, older than me, felt the same. As I kissed a dear friend in her 80s good night, I suggested we should take some solace in the belief persisting among the young that protest could change a government's mind. At least they haven't given up hope, I said. My generation felt like that during Vietnam, she replied. Her words sent me tumbling back through time to when I was 5, sitting in front of a black and white TV, playing with my toys, while my parents watched Saigon fall. I saw something then which has stayed with me forever. A dead and disemboweled child being carried over the heads of a group of Vietnamese men through a burning wasteland of rubble. My friend kissed me in return and said, "It just keeps going. It never ends. The horror is we are powerless to stop it. Until we're not powerless anymore, of course. But that takes the kind of courage on behalf of ordinary people which I've not seen in my lifetime." That was wisdom, and that was hope. That article was by Neil Mackay.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.